Hi, Darryl from Darbeth here. We have seen in recent days Google is threatening to withdraw from Australia. So what does that mean and what's the impact on small businesses? A while ago, the ACCC launched an investigation into the digital media platforms around Australia, and specifically they were targeting the impact of Google and Facebook, but not only them. And they came back with a draft code of conduct, which was an optional voluntary code of conduct. The government sent them away and said, turn it into a mandatory code of conduct. And this is what they have now come back with. They are due to report to Parliament on the 12th of February with their final report. There is already a draft legislation which is ready to go, which we've got some excerpts that we're going to be talking about in there. But in essence, the news media want to claim some compensation for the digital giants using the material that the news people produce. It's, when you look at it on the surface, that's just a copyright issue. So if we produce something and somebody else uses it, then we would expect to be compensated for that use. And this started out as being the basis of the argument, but things really have moved on from there. So we got the report which is coming in, and people are, as I said, are now starting to really react to it, because we've got a few weeks before the final report is presented to Parliament. Initially, the ACCC was just targeting Google and Facebook, but that also means all of their dependents. So when you target Facebook, you're targeting Instagram, you target Google, you're targeting Google Maps, and that whole alphabet soup of entities in there. So there are going to be a lot of things which are actually impacted on that. Now, I mentioned before, you think it's a copyright type situation. Now, if we look at some understanding of the Copyright Act, which we'll get a bit of a view up in a minute, it's very difficult to actually get a clear understanding of that. But in this particular area, as you can see what's on the screen there, you are able to reproduce almost anything for the purposes of reporting on news, which is what we're talking about in this particular instance, because News Corp in particular and all of the media outlets were saying there was an unfair advantage because Google and Facebook were using their work in producing the news and getting financial advantage for it and not paying them. But when we look at what's in the copyright, we see that they already have the right to reproduce almost anything from a news point of view. So we're going on further from that. And so the draft legislation is wanting to have some compensation back to the news outlets for when news is being used. Now, that does sound reasonable on the surface, but when you look at what is actually going on, can understand why Google and Facebook and all of the others are very, very cautious, and they are reacting, because what they have defined in this legislation is not what you would think would come under the Copyright Code. It's actually anything at all. And if we look at some of the other excerpts from section 52B and 52C, you can see them coming up on your screen now. It includes in 52B, point B, which is line 21, a link to the content. So it's not just having a news item displayed in Google or in Facebook. If somebody puts a link to that on there, then it's caught under this legislation. And the news corporations are expecting these digital media platforms to come in and to pay money for it. The legislation is targeting two major groups. The ones they call the digital media platforms, which is Google, Facebook, or any other search engine, any other social media platform where these things could happen. So that's the digital media platforms. They are a defined group, and the government has set up a register, or will set up a register, so you know whether you're on this or not, which does mean for small business you're not going to be accidentally caught up, you know, in all of this. The other group are the news corporations, and again there is a specific set of rules. You need to be under the code of practice for journalists and things like that. So it's fairly clear whether you're on one camp or the other. And if you're not in one of those two, which is most people, you are not covered by the legislation. However, you're going to be impacted by it. We are all going to be impacted by what's going on. The copyright protection we've just noticed. That what is also not clear, if you go and have a look back at those points again, is on the second group we have the agencies, the digital media platforms, are supposed to share all the links and everything else that goes with them. But they are also being asked to share, I think we're looking for the next one on, is if there are any changes to the ranking algorithms or anything that changes the way the content is displayed, that they are supposed to advise the news platforms on what those changes are. Now, these have been very, very tightly protected by Google and Facebook and all those other social media devices. I well remember when the initial days of Google came out and the search rankings and the search engine optimization, a lot of people were told how it would happen. So we ended up doing some keyword stuffing in some hidden fields, and it was irrelevant comment was being brought up. And one of the things that really worried me just from a personal level is I was doing searches for technical bits and pieces, and the sites would come up and there's a little bit of technical stuff in the centre of the page, but over on the right and on the left they were advertising other things that weren't really family friendly at all, because they had done some keyword stuffing. And while I might have been looking for some technical thing, the content that was being displayed was not actually technical content, not the whole of it. So that is the sort of thing that they are trying to protect, and I can understand wanting to make sure that when people search for something they actually get what it is that they are searching for, instead of somebody trying to trick them into doing that. So I can also understand the reticence for these organisations to share the result of these algorithms in that. Now, in the legislation it does say that they don't have to share proprietary information, but this is like a double-edged sword. When how you rank the content, how you curate the content, all of those sorts of things, that's letting the news corporations know the reasons behind what's going on, and then that is just going to open up Pandora's box, and your people will just start gaming the system and going around in circles. So what do the news corporations do? Basically nothing except collect the cash. All they need to do is set up a relationship with these digital platforms, and whenever they list these sorts of things, they get paid according to how many times it occurs, and that's part of the bargaining code of conduct. They come to an agreement on that. Now, where does that impact us as individuals, as small businesses? Well, we're not directly impacted by the legislation, as I said, but anybody that uses the internet somehow, somewhere uses a search engine, somehow, somewhere ends up using social media, and all of those are caught in this web. Now, let's say I was on social media and this legislation was in place, and I decided to put a link on there to a news item about what we've just been talking about. Let's say it was on Facebook. Now, Facebook had no control over that, but they are going to have to pay for a link that I posted on there. What are they going to do with that? Well, all you can do, if that's going to cost you extra and you're in a business, you've either got to recover the costs or you've got to eliminate those costs. So Facebook, they are talking about preventing any sorts of news items being put on their post at all. So it's blanket moving that out. Google, they're far more ubiquitous, and they are talking about exiting out of Australia completely if this legislation comes to play. Can they do this? Well, they're not in China. Facebook have pulled out of China. The events over in the US with the presidential election have shown that all these tech giants, they're not afraid to cut people out if they think it's in their best interest. So they definitely can. Will they? Well, that's the unknown question. And I don't think even they know, and they're waiting to see what the end result of this legislation is. So the future for us, well, if we're running small businesses, then if something comes in, there is going to be a change, an unknown change in the way that people search for our businesses. There is going to be an unknown change in the way that social media reacts. So all I can say at this point in time is that we need to strengthen our websites if they're not already, and make sure that they are capable. If you are running a Facebook only change, Facebook only marketing campaign, you need to add other forms into that. You need to look at non-digital ways, and people have found over this COVID time that yes, it's actually good to communicate with other people directly. So who knows what's going to happen? 12th of February is going to be a major day because that's when the report will come in, but it will be after that that we will actually know what is going to happen when people thought through and understand what the ramifications are. What do? Watch this space. Who knows what's going to happen? See you next week.